Modern people forget the wisdom of tribal traditions. I do. And when I think about the gifts that that this ancient wisdom has, we're going to have to, if we want to bring that back into our lives, we're going to have to learn from the people that are doing it, actively doing it. And it's going to seem weird to us. It's not going to be what we're used to, because it is different. It's a different realm. It's a different way of being. I'd like to share with you a story from Malidoma Somé from his book, The Healing Wisdom of Africa. He talks about, at the age of 4, being ruthlessly ripped away from his family to go to missionary school in Africa, and how hard that was. And it was brutal. He literally had the English language and I guess French language beaten into him. And he escaped at age 20, but he came home to find that he didn't belong there either. It was this very different world. He'd gotten used to Western world, and he was caught in between. And the story describes, I think, the incredible wisdom and healing power that tribal traditions have that we've lost. Let me share it. My 15 years in Western institutions had created a huge gap between me and my people. Returning home was not satisfactory because I felt that I didn't belong. I returned to my village not being able to speak in the language of my people and not being able to embrace their manners because I found the customs disgusting. To help me reintegrate into my family and village, the elders decided that I should undergo the initiation rituals appropriate to the boys of the village who are on the verge of puberty. There I was, taking part in processes with boys many years younger than I. The pressures on me not to fail was enormous, for failing initiation rituals could have meant death, for some of the rituals are physically dangerous, or the inability to reconnect with my people and be accepted as an adult. The initiation processes were physically excruciating. On this particular afternoon, I had exhausted every resource in trying to outwit the elders who had given me the assignment to sit down and look at a tree until its true nature was revealed. The idea, of course, was completely absurd because my rather westernized mind, I had by that time been educated for 15 years in French missionary schools, was totally unable to grasp what it meant just to sit down and look at a tree. The experience was made worse by complete physical discomfort. I remember well the temperature of 110 degrees, my nakedness, sweat, and hunger, the hot gravel, and crawling ants. In the middle of all this, I was being asked to ignore the discomfort and focus my attention on a tree. A stupid exercise, I thought. After about 30 hours of this excruciating discomfort, including the shame of being caught trying to lie about what I was experiencing in order to fool the elders into thinking I had gotten it, I realized that the one thing I had to do was to find some way to end the ordeal. I had moved to a critical juncture. I could give up and terminate the exercise right there, which would mean terminating my initiation, or I could find some way through. I felt shame and failure, and I was crying. What was wrong with me that I could not do what I was asked to do? I was failing at an initiation task, and my sense of ostracism from my peers, they hadn't been taken away from home and asked to endure 15 years in a foreign culture, became even more painful and intolerable. Through my tears, however, I continued to keep an eye on the tree, and I looked at it. As I looked at it, I suddenly began speaking to it, as if I had finally discovered that it had a life of its own. I told it all about my discontent and my sadness, and how I felt that it had abandoned me to the shame of lying and of being laughed at. I then spoke to the tree again, not angrily, but respectfully. I told her that after all, it was not her fault that I could not see, but mine. I simply lacked the ability. What I really needed to do was to come to terms with my own emptiness and lack of sight. because I knew she would always be there when I needed to use her to take a good look at my own shortcomings and inadequacies. What happened next is the kind of experience that, like the encounter with the rabbit, he has an earlier encounter as a child, molded my perception forever. The tree that I had been watching for so long was no longer there, and in its place was a beautiful green lady. I do not know if the tree became her or if she stepped out of the tree, but this really doesn't matter. Where the tree had been, there was now a figure that looked like a human being in the shape of a woman, very tall, probably 7.5 feet tall. Her tunic was silky and black, and she wore a veil over her face. And when I looked again, she had lifted the veil, revealing an unearthly face. I call her the Green Lady because she was green. Her skin was green, but the greenness in her had nothing to do with the color of her skin. She was green from the inside out, as if her body was filled with green fluid. I do not know how I knew this, but this green was the expression of immeasurable love. What I felt was an intensity similar to what I experienced with the rabbit and the little contomble. Again, Ada, that experience. As soon as she appeared, I felt some sort of shock that enveloped my whole body. It produced in me a feeling of the type that I had never experienced before and that I had never experienced again. There was a magnetic pull towards her, and I don't know how I got there, whether I crawled or ran, but I found myself in her arms. It was a homecoming of utmost healing. I was sobbing as I had never done before, for I felt that I was in the hands of the ultimate divine being, hands that provided the ultimate sense of acceptance and home that could never be denied. I had no idea how long I was in her arms, but it felt like a long time. I had no intention of ending this embrace. Having finally gotten this feeling, this support, this love, I had the feeling that all we needed to do was just go home and live happily ever after. But then I realized that she was telling me that she needed to go, and I needed to go too. Of course, that was not part of my plan, and as a result, I found myself clinging to her. How could she go without me? I was with her, holding her totally in my hands, so I held her more strongly. It was then that a strange thing happened, which I had never been able to figure out, changing the softness of her feminine body into some kind of ruggedness that became more and more uncomfortable. With a pleading gesture, I lifted my head to beg her to stay, and my eyes told me that I was hugging the tree. The feeling was very humbling. I felt at first that I'd been deceived, yet my body and spirit felt very subdued, with an almost religious posture. I didn't dwell on the feeling of being tricked because the strong feeling of the reality of who I had experienced was still present. I was bitterly disappointed at not being able to go with her, and disappointed that such a powerful and loving being had been turned back into a tree. As I sobbed, holding the tree, I became aware of the comments that the elders who had been watching me were making. I heard one of them say, "They are always like this. First they resist and play dumb when there are a lot of things waiting to be done, and then when it happens, they won't let it go either. Children are so full of contradictions. The very experience you rejected before with lies, you are now accepting without apology." The last sentence seemed to have been directed at me. I looked up at the elder who spoke. He met my eyes, and I felt no further need to be holding on to the tree. Hours had passed, and the sun had already set. "Go find something to eat and make your bed for the night," he said gently.